What's up, guys? This is Kephas.
So today I've got something that I think is pretty cool and I want to share it with you guys. If you know anything about me, then you know I'm a huge fan of the single button assistant. It has significantly improved my enjoyment of the game being a visually impaired player. It's an amazing accessibility asset and I've been able to do so much more in World of Warcraft with it. It's amazing. And if you use the tool like me, then you know that most classes have at least one ability that the single button assistant doesn't use. It's usually your main offensive cooldown or some optional talent that kind of serves as your main cooldown that usually creates a big time burst window, and I think that's why the single button assistant chooses not to use it, or why Blizzard hasn't incorporated it in with the single button assistant. And so, as dumb as this might sound, for me, being severely visually impaired, have no peripheral vision, very nearsighted, even just tracking one ability can be a bit of a challenge, because when I'm in the middle of combat, having to look down at my action bar to figure out this ability and how much time is left for it to be available again can be a little bit tough. So I've worked on a couple of different ways to manage these extra abilities that the single button assistant doesn't use. And I'm going to kind of share them with you guys today. So now, there's one method that I'm not going to go too deep into, but it is one that I want to mention because I've shared it in other videos, and I've even created macros using an add-on called GSE, which will allow you to essentially combine abilities in a macro, and it will cycle through different abilities. If you have an offensive cooldown or an ability that the single button assistant doesn't use that triggers the global cooldown, then you're not able to macro it in with the single button assistant. You can use GSE and it will cycle between the single button assistant and whatever ability that the single button assistant doesn't use. That is one method. Like I said, I don't use that method anymore, so I'm not going to go into depth on how to do that, but I did want to mention it, and you can certainly look it up and see. There are macros out there that people have made, some that I've made, others have made, that you can use if you want to. That is one method. Now, I've gotten to where I like to actually use that ability separately and manage it myself so that I have a little bit more control over it for the most part. And I want to show you guys how I've managed to do that. So if you probably noticed that if you look down at the bottom of my screen in the middle of my action bars, I'm playing with console port. So I have a right action bar, a left action bar, and in the middle, I have this big circle thing. This is a weak aura that I've created that will track True Shot, which is my offensive cooldown as a marksmanship hunter, and it's the ability that the single button assistant doesn't use. And so I have True Shot on my action bar, and as this is glowing, that means that True Shot is available. So if I use True Shot, you can see the animations happen, and now that circle is no longer glowing, and you can see it's slowly starting to fill up again. There's a little bit of a color going around the circle, and as that fills up, then True Shot will become available again. And that's basically how I'm able to track my offensive cooldowns. I've made one for pretty much every class that isn't a healer, because I don't play healers, and healers also tend to not use the single button assistant. But you can see I've called it ultimate cooldowns because I was kind of inspired by Overwatch. That's kind of where I got the idea from, and that's how I designed it to kind of be similar to that. And so it kind of is like your ultimate cooldown, your offensive cooldown. And you can kind of go in here if you want to use it. I'll have a link in Wago. You can import it into weak auras, and you can go down and look at each class, and you can click, like for Hunter here, I'll click it, and there's one for each spec. And you can see it uses True Shot for Marksman. For Beast Mastery, it uses Call of the Wild. That's what it tracks. And then for Survival Hunter, it'll track Coordinated Assault. And so every class has different abilities. I won't go over all of them, but you can kind of get the idea here. Just whatever the single button assistant tends to not use is what I've gone with. There are a couple classes that have a couple of abilities that it doesn't use, but I just kind of picked the main one. That was kind of the idea. But either way, you can kind of look and see if it's something that you want to look at. You can also move it around. You can go in here and mess around with the different settings and display, move where you want it on screen or whatever. You can kind of mess with that if you want to, if it's something that you actually do want to use. Like I said, because I am very visually impaired, this is a great way for me to track it. It's easy to glance down at, and I can just kind of quickly see, like I can tell just by looking at it right now that it's getting close. So when I'm in the middle of combat and I'm fighting I'm not having to look down at some tiny icon. I can just kind of look down and see that, oh, look, that circle's about to fill up again. And certainly once it's glowing like that, I can definitely look down and quickly see, bam, I can use True Shot again. And now I'm just off to the races doing tons of damage, and it's a lot of fun. So that's kind of the idea. Obviously, it's definitely helpful for me to just kind of track it that way. And certainly for those abilities that are off the, or that trigger the global cooldown, this is definitely the best way that I've found to manage them. So that's kind of the idea there. Now, I've mentioned this already, abilities that are off and on the global cooldown. So if your ability does not trigger the global cooldown, then there is something else that you can do. So the method I've shared is for someone who would say want to have control over how their offensive cooldown is used. You put it on a separate button, you track it, and you use it. I found a tracking method that works for me. You don't have to use mine, but you can use different ones. Now, if you're somebody that you're like, I don't really care about tracking this extra ability, or I just want to use it whenever it's available, use it on cooldown or whatever, there are some abilities, like I said, that do not trigger the global cooldown. Like, for example, True Shot here does not trigger the global cooldown, and you are able to macro those in with anything else that would otherwise trigger the global cooldown. So in my case, that would be the single button assistant. So with True Shot, I'm able to create a macro and put in the single button assistant and also True Shot. And as I use the single button assistant with this macro, it will also use True Shot on cooldown. So let's go ahead and move this off here. Here, so you can kind of keep an eye on that. And I'll grab this and bring it down here and we'll put it on the action bar. So there you go. Now, one of the downsides here is, like, if you know how the single button assistant works, it'll cycle through on the icon what ability is going to be used next. If you create a macro with the single button assistant, unfortunately, it will not do that. And I don't know how to fix that. I don't think there is a way right now to fix it. So that is one of the downsides. It'll just have the swooping arrow, and that's all you're ever going to see unless you add an ability to the show tooltip section of the macro. So that is one downside. You can certainly add the single button assistant to an extra button if you want to know what it's going to use. But yeah, that's the downside. But either way, if you look here now, if I start using this macro, it's using the single button assistant and it used True Shot right away. So I don't have to use it on a separate button. I don't have to track it anymore. Like I said, if I don't care about when it's used, I just want to use it whenever. I'm not trying to get more out of it. Maybe I'm just playing very casually, doing very easy content, and just do not care at all. This is something that you can do for sure if you want to. So you have that option is available. There are a lot of classes that have abilities that are off the global cooldown, like warriors have Avatar and Recklessness. That's off the global cooldown. Combustion is another one. Icy Veins, even Breath of Syndragosa is one that's off the global cooldown, so you're able to macro those in if you really want to. So that's an option. But then you do have other classes that don't have that option, and that's where tracking them comes into play. So like Army of the Dead is a good example. Your demons like Summon Vile Fiend, or Summon Dark Glare, I think is actually what it's called, or Summon Demonic Tyrant. Those abilities do trigger the global cooldown. Metamorphosis triggers the global cooldown. There are a lot of abilities that the single button assistant doesn't use that work like normal abilities and will trigger the global cooldown, and that's where this tracker really comes in handy, especially in those cases, so that I'm always able to easily track them. So that's basically what I've figured out and how I'm able to handle these extra abilities. It may not be a big deal for many people. Most players probably don't have a problem tracking them, but for people like me who have a disability, it can definitely come in handy to figure out some extra methods to handle different things. And so I hope this was interesting or helpful for people, was informative in some way, and it was able to help you out somehow. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below. You can find my weak aura. I'll have a link to Wago. You can import it into weak auras if you want to use it. And again, like I said, I'd love to hear what you think about it in the comments. Let me know what you'd like me to cover with the single button assistant or whatever. By all means, I'm always open to suggestions. But with all that being said, I will see you guys on the next one.
Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, let me know by clicking that like button. And feel free to share it with your friends so they can enjoy it as well. And if you'd like to see more videos, you can subscribe to the channel and click on the bell icon to be notified as soon as new videos are posted. You can also follow me on Facebook, and if you'd like, you can support my work on Patreon. Links to all that stuff can be found in the description below. This is Kephas. Until next time.